So we need to talk about a recent 9-0 unanimous decision issued by the Supreme Court involving the Fourth Amendment's protections against unconstitutional seizures and when excessive force by law enforcement actually impacts that right. So let's break down what is now happening after that unanimous ruling. Now, real quick, if you're watching this channel, then obviously it's safe to say that you care about the Second Amendment and your rights. Now, here's the thing, even law-abiding gun owners are ending up in jail because they make a bunch of critical mistakes. And those are mistakes that you don't even realize that you're making or that you don't understand that they're illegal. So I put together a free resource called the Legal Survival Guide. It's aimed to help you guys avoid all of those traps that maybe you could fall in. It takes about 2 minutes to read. It's just a simple PDF, and it really could save you years behind bars. I made it to help you guys, again, completely free to download using the link down below. It's just something that I wanted to provide you guys for free so that you can have it in your phone or maybe print it out. And there's a little card also in there that you can put in your wallet to give you additional resources to help you in situations. Obviously, not meant to be legal advice. I'm not your attorney. This isn't an attorney-client relationship, but I wanted to provide you guys some free resources to prevent you falling in some bad situations. Again, if you're interested, click the links down below. It's completely free to do. All you have to do is enter your email to get that free PDF. As I mentioned in the intro, in this video, we're going to be discussing a recent 9-0 unanimous ruling by the Supreme Court. And this case involves the Fourth Amendment's protections against unreasonable searches and seizures, and when law enforcement and their activities engaging in things like excessive force actually impacts the Fourth Amendment. This new unanimous ruling by the Supreme Court came in a case called Barnes versus Felix. This new lawsuit should be on everyone's minds, especially gun owners, because it involves how courts must now analyze situations like these ones going forward involving excessive force. As gun owners, we have seen a lot of highly publicized situations where law enforcement interact with lawful gun owners, and through excessive force, the gun owner ends up actually getting shot or maybe even seriously fatally wounded. This analysis by the Supreme Court directly impacts those types of situations and involves your rights in those types of very scary situations. Now, the facts around this case are as follows. Roberto Felix Jr., a law enforcement officer, pulled over an individual, Ashton Barnes, for suspected toll violations. So the reason for the pullover, for the reason for the stop, was essentially toll violations. Officer Felix ordered Barnes to exit his vehicle, and Mr. Barnes opened his door and acted like he was actually going to exit the car, but then he attempted to drive away. Now, reacting in a split second, the officer there, Officer Felix, decided to jump on the ledge of the car as the car was driving away. As the car pulled away with him on the ledge of the car because the door was open and he was kind of standing on the ledge of the open door, he then decided to fire 2 shots at the driver, Barnes, and Barnes was fatally wounded, but eventually the car was stopped. It did stop after the individual was shot. Now, in response to this, the individual's mother and father decided to sue Officer Felix on behalf of the individual there, Ashton Barnes, alleging that the officer there violated his Fourth Amendment right against excessive force. The district court granted summary judgment in favor of Officer Felix, applying the Fifth Circuit's moment of threat rule. So this really was a review of the moment of threat rule and ultimately a review of how the Fifth Circuit ruled and decided this case. The Court of Appeals affirmed, explaining that the moment of threat rule requires asking only whether an officer was in danger at the moment of the threat that resulted in his use of deadly force. Under the rule, events leading up to the shooting are not relevant and are not considered. Here, the precise moment of threat was only the 2 seconds where the officer was on the car and then decided to shoot at the individual. Because Officer Felix could then have reason to believe that his life was in danger between those 2 seconds, the Fifth Circuit panel upheld the ruling in his favor and said that it was a lawful shoot. Now, this case eventually made its way to the United States Supreme Court, and the question the Supreme Court answered in this case was whether courts should apply the moment of threat doctrine or something else when evaluating these types of Fourth Amendment claims. On review, the unanimous Supreme Court held that a claim that a law enforcement officer used excessive force during a stop or arrest is analyzed under the Fourth Amendment, which requires that the force deployed be objectively reasonable from the perspective of a reasonable officer at the scene. The inquiry into the reasonableness of the police force requires analyzing the totality of the circumstances. That analysis demands careful attention to the facts and circumstances relating to the incident. So in this case, the Supreme Court rejected the more limited moment of threat analysis and instead applied a totality of the circumstances approach. They conclude by pointing out that the court does not address a separate question about whether or how an officer's own creation of dangerous situations factors into the reasonableness analysis. So they stated that they did not look at specifically, how the officer here, Officer Felix, could have actually facilitated or factored into the whole dangerous situation by jumping onto the ledge of the car. That was not brought to them on review. Instead, that is something that the lower court is going to have to review. So the main thrust of the decision was rejecting the more limited scope of analysis applied by the moment of threat review. Instead, the Supreme Court orders lower courts here to look at the totality of the circumstances before and during the incident to get a more comprehensive picture of whether or not the Fourth Amendment is violated. Now, like I mentioned, there was a concurrence authored by Kavanaugh that was joined by Thomas, Barrett, and Alito. The concurring opinion really focused on pointing out how dangerous traffic stops really are for police officers and how those types of situations amount to the most fatalities for police officers. So they wanted to really point that out and show that they, are aware of how dangerous these situations really are for police officers. They also point out how when a driver pulls away like Barnes did, the officers really don't have a lot of great options, and how it really puts them in a conundrum and it puts them in a lot of, danger and also puts the public in a lot of danger as well when an individual engages in that type of conduct. They state because of all this, that is why the court needs to look at the totality of the interaction. Under the court's precedents, that inquiry involves a careful balancing of the nature and quality of the intrusion on the individual's Fourth Amendment interests against the countervailing governmental interests at stake. So in essence, the Supreme Court found that courts must look beyond just the moment of the threat and instead look at the totality of the situation. The Supreme Court, because of this, just also issued their mandate, sending this case back down to the Fifth Circuit for a new review in light of their new ruling. Now, that doesn't mean that the Fifth Circuit will find that Officer Felix here acted incorrectly. They could still rule in favor of the officer, but the Fifth Circuit will need to look at the relevant information before and during the incident to make the proper analysis. Also, one of the questions that the Supreme Court did not answer, like I mentioned, is whether an officer's actions created a dangerous situation and how should that factor into the reasonableness analysis. Instead, that is something that the Fifth Circuit will look at if arguments are raised in front of them about how the officer and his actions potentially, added to the situation and, acted beyond reasonableness and facilitated something that actually caused this situation. Now, this case is important because it impacts everyone's Fourth Amendment protections against excessive force. For gun owners, this is important because, especially in light of all the highly publicized situations we've seen pop up where lawful gun owners are actually shot by police officers, interactions with ATF and other agencies. So this is something that you should be aware of and understand, how this will actually be reviewed by a court. If law enforcement overreacts or misjudges a lawful gun owner as someone who's bad and maybe, actually shoots them, the totality of the circumstances test now gives courts more leeway to rule in favor of the citizen. So this is a critical decision that I wanted to bring to your attention. It has now been ruled on by the Supreme Court, 9-0 unanimous in favor of the individual here. And now this is going back down to the Fifth Circuit for a re-review in light of what the Supreme Court just said. So again, very important review that's going to happen in the Fifth Circuit now. So if you like this video, if you have any questions, make sure you comment down below and I'll try to answer those to the best of my ability. If you like the video and you want to support the channel, one of the best ways to do that is to simply subscribe to the channel. Also, you can check out my website, armscholar.com, where we have the free legal guide that you guys can get. If you sign up for the free legal guide, all you have to do is put in your email. We will email you a PDF. And over on the website, we also have channel merchandise, shirts, and all of that you can check out. But as always, thank you guys so much for all of your support. And never forget, this nation was built by armed scholars, and this nation will be maintained by armed scholars.